Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla wa anta taj'alul hazna idha shi'ta sahla. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khair for joining me once again this evening for another recording of Risalatul Mustarshideen. We left off last week in the section where the author he says وَخِفِ اللَّهَ فِي دِينِكَ. So it's an important arena of many different important and noteworthy points that the author is going to raise, inshallah, regarding developing our relationship with Allah, inshallah. And I won't hesitate to try and emphasize some of the important elements and some of the important fawaid or benefits that we can derive from some of what the author he mentions here, inshallah. And without further ado, the author he says, alayhi rahmatullah, وَنَفَعَنَ اللَّهُ بِعُلُومِهِ فِي الدَّارَيْنِ آمين, and may Allah enable all of us to benefit from his knowledge. He says, وَخِفِ اللَّهَ فِي دِينِكَ, which means fear your Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty, فِي دِينِكَ, in relation regarding your religion. So it's very important for us then to understand that khawf min Allah is a pinnacle of our faith. To have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a type of fear that kind of propels us to do good, especially regarding our religion, is something which is elementary and something which is very important and primary, and it's something which is a primary foundational principle of our religion. It's very, very important for us to have some type of fear, because if you don't have fear, you can do whatever you want to do. If you don't have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what's stopping you from doing something which is impermissible? If there's no fear of your Lord and there's no fear of retribution, then you can do anything that you want to do and you won't have to fear the consequences of anything. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing the nature of the human being, has set out some parameters, boundaries and deterrents in order for a person to act and abide by his sharia, and to act and abide by in a way in which he or she doesn't cause harm for themselves and doesn't cause harm for others. And that's something which is very important. So, and it's something which is praiseworthy. So the concept of fear isn't something necessarily bad. People often assume that to fear something has to always be something negative. So it always carries a negative connotation, but that's not necessarily something which is the case. Sometimes a type of fear, or almost all of the time, a type of fear that propels you to do something which is righteous, or that encourages you to do something which is correct, is a type of fear which is good. So that's a good emotion. It's not something which is negative at all. And the reason why we have all of these different emotions are for it to be used in ways in which it can be beneficial and it can propel us to do good. So even things which we consider to be blameworthy, like anger, for example, every emotion has its place, and every type of feeling that we have has its place. Fear has its place. The best and the most superior type of fear is the fear of God Almighty. But fear is something that is something which is part and parcel of our DNA. So it's something which is elementary to our survival as a species. So it's something which is important. وَخِفِ اللَّهَ فِي دِينِكَ. But the most superior type of fear is the one that's in connection with the unseen. وَخِفِ اللَّهَ فِي دِينِكَ. Have fear of your Lord Allah in regarding your religion. So uphold your religion as much as you can. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Fear Allah as much as you can. وَرْجُهُ فِي جَمِيعِ أُمُورِكَ. And have hope in Him regarding all of your affairs. Have hope in Allah. Do not let your relationship with Allah be based on only one type or one trajectory. Let it be something in which you have a hope in Allah for every single thing that you do. Every single thing that you do, let there be a hope in Allah for the best outcome. وَرْجُهُ فِي جَمِيعِ أُمُورِكَ. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient for his servant. Allah, he says in the Quran, أَلَيْسَ اللَّهُ بِكَافٍ عَبْدَهُ. Is not Allah sufficient for his servants? So if Allah is sufficient and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient for his creation, then really you don't need to hope in anyone other than Allah. The author he says, وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَكَ. Be patient regarding those things which afflict you. So be patient in that which afflicts you. We live in a world in which this we live in a world that was created in order to test us. This world, this abode that we live in, is not an abode of only tranquility and comfort and beauty. We live in a place where there are trials and tribulations, and we will all be tested some way, somehow. Nobody leaves this dunya except that they are tested some way, somehow. What's the response that's required from us as believing people when those trials do arrive, or when they do come, is that we try and be patient as much as we can. Allah says in the Quran, إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُم بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. Those people who are patient, they will be recompensed. They will be recompensed for their patience with a type of reward that never ends. So the author says, وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَكَ. Be patient which afflicts you. This whole world was created as an abode for trials and tribulations. Allah says in the Quran, وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً أَتَصْبِرُونَ. We have made each and every single one of you a fitna, or a tribulation, to the other person. Will you then show patience? The author says, قال علي رضي الله عنه, and Ali ibn Abi Talib رضي الله عنه, he said, لا تخف إلا ذنبك. Don't fear anything except your sins, because that's the thing that will bring you calamity on the day of accountability. So the only really thing that you should be fearing is your own sins and your own iniquity and your own deficiency and your lack of relationship with your Lord. That's the thing that you should be fearing the most, because that's the thing that you'll be held accountable for on the day of judgment. So if that's the case, then a person needs to try and develop that relationship with Allah as much as possible. A good relationship, a relationship that's not based on sinning or iniquity or wrongdoing, oppression, harm. All of these things are things which bring about calamities on the day of judgment. So a person should try and withdraw from this as much as they can. And don't fear anything except for yourself on your day of judgment. That's the only thing you should be fearing. Shouldn't fear anything except your own iniquity, your own sin, your own doing. اقرأ كتابك كفى بنفسك اليوم عليك حسيبا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, اقرأ كتابك. On the day of judgment, you will be given a book of accountability, and it will be said, go ahead and read this book. Enough for accountability is your own soul's doing against yourself. Your soul is more than sufficient and enough to be that which holds account against yourself. Your soul is enough. You will hold it yourself to account on the day of judgment. Nobody's gonna need to say anything about you. I mean, your record is there for you to see everything that you've done. So if that's the case, then a person should only truly fear their sins and their own iniquity and their own deficiency, because that's what they're going to be held accountable on the day of judgment. No one's really going to ask you about anybody else. Nobody's going to care about one's going to care about anybody else on that day. People are not going to be preoccupied with other people except for amending wrongs which were done. But people will primarily care about themselves on the day of judgment. Everybody will be looking for salvation on that day. And one of the things that they would regret the most is all of the sins that they did. That's one of the biggest factor that will contribute to a huge amount of regret on Yawm al-Qiyamah, because people will almost always recognize, and it will come into fruition, and they will readily acknowledge, and they will see in front of their eyes everything that they did wrong. Yeah. وَأَنَّ سَعْيَهُ سَوْفَ يُرَى. Allah says in the Quran. And everybody will see the actions that they did. You will see yourself on Yawm al-Qiyamah. You will see yourself from an angle you'd never ever seen yourself. Nowadays, it's very easy for a person not to be conscious of their own selves. We're not really very conscious of what we do. Sometimes we do things we don't even recognize. We don't even realize we're doing something wrong. But on that day, you will see yourself in a way in which you've never seen yourself before. It will be an eye opener. It will be an epiphany. But the only problem is that it's going to be a bit too late for that. There's not really much amends that can be done once you are held account in the hereafter or the afterlife. That's when it becomes a bit too late. However, there's much amends that can be done whilst you're still alive and whilst we're still alive. So that's really the point that we can take from everything, is that we try and amend whatever we can whilst we're living here in this worldly life, whilst we're still alive. Try and be better people, better human beings, better Muslims. That's what we can do. Don't forget about what other people are doing. Forget about what other people are saying. Forget about anything else other than yourself. Focus on yourself. That is the best way for a person to receive the salvation that they need on the Day of Judgment. The author, he says, وَلَا تَرْجُ إِلَّا رَبَّكَ, and do not have hope in anyone except your Lord. Because really, it's only your Lord who can help you on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and in this worldly life also. No one else can help you except your Lord. So if that's the case, and that's the reality, then only have hope in Him, because only Allah can give you salvation when you need it, and only Allah can save you from yourself, even from anybody else, and from your own self. Only Allah can save you. So if that's the case, then have hope in Him. In order to have hope in Him, you have to recognize who Allah is, and you have to know who Allah is. So there has to be some kind of a background, at least basic level of knowledge on who Allah is, in order for you to understand why He is worthy of your hope, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one who created you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one who nurtured you from young. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who saved you on many occasions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who, the reason why you are still breathing and living and walking and talking right now is because of Allah. So if that's the case, then why don't you have hope in Him? Why don't you have that? Why don't you develop a relationship with Him? Why don't you become closer to Allah? Why don't you have hope in Him? Why did you give up so easily? Why did you fall into sin and iniquity when you could have just turned to Allah very easily, and He would have accepted you without any hesitation whatsoever? قل يا عبادي الذين أسرفوا على أنفسهم لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله إن الله يغفر الذنوب جميعا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, say to them, O my servants who have transgressed against themselves, do not despair ever of Allah's mercy. Never despair of His mercy. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He forgives every sin. He is often forgiving, and He is the most merciful. The author then he says, and this is showing some good Islamic etiquette, especially when somebody wants to learn about Allah, because we just mentioned now that it's very important for us to learn about Allah. So then the author, he says, وَلَا يَسْتَحِي الَّذِي لَا يَعْلَمُ أَن يَسْأَلَ حَتَّى يَعْلَمُ. And let the one who doesn't know not be shy. Let shyness not hold the person who doesn't know back from asking until they know. So a person who doesn't have knowledge, or a person who wants to learn, let not shyness be something that prevents this person from asking in order to gain that knowledge. Okay, so let that not be something that holds you back. Ask away and ask people who know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, to ask the people who أهل الذكر إن كنتم لا تعلمون فاسألوا أهل الذكر إن كنتم لا تعلمون. Ask the people who know if you don't know. And that's what we should be doing. If we don't know anything in the religion, that's our responsibility, is that we try our best to find out, and not just run off to that which we feel the most comfortable with, but try and actually really find out what the reality is. The author, he says, ولا يستحي من يسأل عما لا يعلم أن يقول لا أعلم. The author, he says, and let the one who is asked about something that he or she doesn't know, let them not be shy of saying I don't know if they truly don't know. They truly don't know. So this is usually regarding people who are scholarly, people who are students of knowledge, people who are learning, or people who are already learned. Let shyness not be the reason for you to not say I don't know if you don't know. If you don't know, you don't know. And instead of giving an answer that a person doesn't know, and sometimes we feel some kind of a responsibility almost that we have to answer a person's queries, as if we are the ones who the whole religion, as if we're the ones who are carrying the entire religion for Allah, and if it's not us, then the whole religion collapses. That's not really what it's supposed to be, and that's not how it's supposed to be. If a person doesn't know, they don't know. And the early Muslims were very conservative in the way they would deal with questions. They really did not want to be the one who's responsible for answering anything. And if they could defer the question to somebody else, they would almost always do that. That's their culture, and that's how they used to do it. they did not want to be responsible for somebody's religion on Yawm al-Qiyamah, because they would fear, what if I give the wrong answer? Today everybody just wants to jump and give the answer that they know. Everybody is jumping for the opportunity to answer a question, and everybody is jumping to the opportunity, you know, to get into the most complicated issues, when in reality the early Muslims would, the Salaf, they would run away from these kind of things. And if there was somebody else who could take that responsibility, they would gladly defer the question or the query to a person, so to somebody else. They would not want to take that responsibility whatsoever. And that's telling. Look how times have changed. And we're talking about the early Muslims, people who probably had the knowledge to be able to answer those questions, were the ones who are running away. And that comes from a place of knowledge. And that's a sign. Usually people who have knowledge are not very quick to answer questions. Whereas people who lack knowledge and are very ignorant are the ones who are really enjoy engaging and really enjoy, you know, getting into these really difficult issues. And that's the problem. So a person of true knowledge wouldn't really be very quick to answer and would gladly defer it to somebody else if they could. Whereas a person who is less knowledgeable, or a person who doesn't really understand the spirit of the Sharia, they would feel as if though they are responsible and they want to answer everything and they want to be the ones who put themselves out there, which is really not the way to go about it. The author says, وَلَا يَسْتَحِي مَنْ يُسْأَلُ عَمَّا لَا يَعْلَمُ أَنْ يَقُولَ لَا أَعْلَمُ. So let the person who doesn't know, let shyness not hold them back from saying, I don't know. Imam Malik, he had somebody come to him all the way from Al-Andalus to ask questions regarding mainly fiqh questions, you know, questions based on Islamic jurisprudence. And for the absolute vast majority of the questions that he was asked, he said, I don't know. And then at the end, the person said, what am I going to say to the people back home? Like, you know, they're expecting me to come back with, sufficient answers to these queries, you know, satisfactory answers. And he said, tell them that Malik doesn't know. That's what he said. So he said, tell them, anna Malik la yadri. It's no problem. Tell him that Malik doesn't know. He didn't feel that he was responsible. He didn't feel like he had to. He didn't put any pressure on himself that he had. No, he just doesn't know. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's part of the religion. So that should be something, and that's a section, or that's an aspect of Islamic etiquette that really should be something that's practiced today. The author, he says, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الصَّبْرَ مِنَ الْإِيمَانِ بِمَنْزِلَةِ الرَّأْسِ مِنَ الْجَسَدِ. He says, then have certain knowledge that patience, or the relationship between patience and belief, faith, is like the relationship between the head and the body. Okay, so the relationship between patience and faith, iman, is like the relationship between the head, the human head, or any living creature, the head in relation to the body. The author, he says, فَإِذَا قُطِعَ الرَّأْسُ ذَهَبَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ. If the head is removed, the whole body dies. So if the head is removed, what is left of the body? Nothing. The body dies along with it. So the author says, فَإِذَا سَمِعْتَ كَلِمَةً تُغْضِبُكَ فِي عِرْضِكَ فَعْفُ وَاصْفَحْ. The author says, if you hear anything then that angers you regarding somebody said something, attacked you personally, said something about you personally, they attacked your integrity, your honor, فَعْفُ وَاصْفَحْ, overlook and forgive. Which is something which is really very difficult to do. People often respond very badly to when they're attacked personally. But really, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاصْفَحْ. Overlook what they are saying and overlook these words. It takes a lot of strength and bravery to be able to overlook and to forgive wrong that was done to you. But that's where the healing comes from. The real healing comes from when you can overlook and you can forgive and you move on. That's really where the healing comes. That's where the healing comes from, and it says more about you than anybody else, especially those people who are attacking you. So he says, فَإِذَا سَمِعْتَ كَلِمَةً, if you ever hear a word that was said, تُغْضِبُكَ فِي عِرْضِكَ, and it really was a hurtful thing and it makes you upset and angry, فَعْفُ وَاصْفَحْ, forgive and overlook. And then the author says, فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ, for verily and definitely and assuredly, that is min azmi al-umur, that is from the greatest level of determination. Okay, that is a great level of character to have, because it means that this person is somebody who's in control over themselves. This person isn't somebody who's overwhelmed by their emotions. This is a person who can control themselves, and that's really what it means to be a true human being, is that you can control yourself and that you're the one in control, and nobody's in control over you. And then the author, he quotes Umar ibn al-Khattab and he says, قال عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه من خاف الله لم يشفي غيظه. He says, whoever truly fears Allah, their anger will never truly be healed. What does this mean? It's very interesting. A person who truly fears Allah is somebody who's going to be tested a lot. So this is a person who's always going to be tested in their emotions and in their anger, and their people are going to say certain things, and Allah will test you with people. وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً أَتَصْبِرُونَ. So a person who truly fears Allah, they will be tested with the abuse of people, and this is something which is reality. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He even mentioned in the Quran, وَلَا تَسْمَعُنَّ مِنَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ الَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا أَذًى كَثِيرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, you will definitely hear from the people of the book and the people who are idol worshippers, much abuse. You will hear from them so much abuse. Allah says that in the Quran. But وَإِن تَصْبِرُوا وَتَتَّقُوا, but if you show patience, and that's the whole point. Your response is that you need to be patient. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. That's إِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ. That is from the greatest level of determination. You've determined your response very well, and you're the one in control. And nobody can just say something to you and then you just lose it. No, you're in control over the way you respond. That's what it means to be a perfect human being, a determined human being, and somebody who's in control. The author says, وَمَنِ اتَّقَاهُ لَمْ يَصْنَعْ مَا يُرِيدُ. And whoever fears Allah, they don't just do what they like. Because this person's bounded by Sharia. This person is bounded by the commandments and the prohibitions. So a person doesn't do what they, if you have taqwa, you're going to be very careful as to what you do. And the author then he says, and then he said, Umar, that's a statement from Umar ibn Khattab. So he says, whoever has taqwa of Allah, he just doesn't do whatever he wants to do. And then he says, وَلَوْلَا يَوْمُ الْقِيَامَةِ لَكَانَ غَيْرَ مَا تَرَوْنَ. And then he says something very interesting. He says, and had it not been for the day of judgment, if that didn't exist, if the day of judgment didn't exist, you would have seen something very different. Meaning from himself, meaning I wouldn't have been acting the way I'm acting now had there not been, meaning I would have made sure, I would have, for those people who've insulted me and those people who've angered me, I would have responded to them very differently had it not been for the day of judgment. Meaning the day of judgment is what keeps me in check. That's what Umar al-Khattab is saying. So something which is very, very interesting. And that shows you that this is somebody, and Umar al-Khattab is somebody who lives, he lives as if though, or he lived as if though the day of judgment was literally tomorrow, was literally the next day. That's how he used to view everything. And that was the determining factor in his life. And that was the primary thing that concerned him. So he would see the day of judgment everywhere. He even said, had it not been for the day of judgment, you would have seen a very different me. I would have been a very different person. But the reason why I am the way I am, and I overlook and I forgive and I don't act out on my emotions, and I don't just, he says the reason why is because of the day of judgment. And anybody who knows Umar al-Khattab knows that he has a very fiery personality, alayhi radiyallahu anhu. May Allah be pleased with him. But the fact that he is able to control himself is because of the fear that he has of accountability. The author then he says, وَرَاعِ هَمَّكَ وَاشْتَغِلْ بِإِصْلَاحِ نَفْسِكَ عَنْ عَيْبِ غَيْرِكَ. So the author he says, focus on fixing yourself as opposed to focusing on the iniquity of other people. So focus on you. In other words, focus on yourself and forget anybody else. Instead of you always talking about so and so and how they're doing and their situation and how they violated the Sharia and how what they've done and what they've said and how they're again. Focus on yourself. That's it. Simple as that. Focus on yourself and take out time and focus on yourself. You've got so much problems yourself. You haven't been guaranteed paradise. We haven't been guaranteed. Who am I to say anything about anybody else? If I haven't been given a contract that stipulates or that has already made an agreement. I haven't signed any document that says I'm going into paradise. So who am I to talk about other people? Who am I to focus most of my time speaking about issues that are far away from me? It's issues that have nothing to do with me purifying myself. So focus on fixing yourself as opposed to the problems of others and the issues that other people have. And the author, he says, فَإِنَّهُ كَانَ يُقَالُ, because it used to be said, this is like a proverb. He says that people used to say, and it used to be said, كَفَى بِالْمَرْءِ عَيْبًا أَنْ يَسْتَبِينَ لَهُ مِنَ النَّاسِ مَا يَخْفَى عَلَيْهِ مِنْ نَفْسِهِ. So the author, he says, it used to be said, enough is it as an embarrassment, or enough is it as a stain on one's character, that every negative trait and action or quality is immediately observable when he looks at other people, but it's hidden from himself or herself. Meaning, imagine you can look at everybody else what they're doing wrong, but you can't see what you're doing wrong. Because that in and of itself is a huge stain on someone's character. That in and of itself shows that this person has big problems. Because kafa, that's enough of a stain, and that's enough of a deficiency in somebody, that all of the wrongdoings of others are very visible to him or her, but their own iniquities and their own wrongdoing is something that they can't see. Although they says, or, and this is part of the saying and part of the proverb, أو يمقت الناس فيما يأتي مثله, meaning enough of it is a stain on someone's character that they dislike somebody or they dislike people for things that he himself does. You criticize other people for something that you yourself are guilty of. Though they says, "Oh, yu'dhiya jalisahu," or somebody who harms a person who's in their attendance. أو يقول في الناس ما لا يعنيه, or they speak about people regarding issues that do not concern them. So these are things which were in the past would have been considered very bad traits, and anybody who had these kind of traits, people would not want to be anywhere near them. And today you have people who this is very normal with. This is actually quite normal now, where people always feel like they have some kind of authority to talk about other people. The author says, وَاسْتَعِنْ بِاللَّهِ عَلَى صَرْفِ الْمَقَادِيرِ. He says, seek Allah's assistance in diverting away that which has been ordained. Meaning, if something was ordained by Allah, Allah's qadr, something was ordained that you don't like, how can you manage, or how should you manage to remove that from yourself? By asking Allah's help. Wasn't Allah the one who put you in a certain situation? It was by Allah's qadr, for example, that He gave you some kind of difficulty. And the best way for you to be able to remove that difficulty is by asking the one who gave it to you in the first place. Simple as that, really. So wasta'in billah, seek Allah's assistance in removing or diverting away from you al-maqadir, that which was ordained. Qala Ali radiyallahu anhu, then he quotes Ali ibn Abi Talib. He says, Ya ibn Adam, O son of Adam, la tafrah bil ghina, do not be excessively happy by wealth or by richness. Do not let wealth be a source of your happiness. Just because you got wealth, that's not a reason to be ecstatic. Then he says, وَلَا تَقْنَطْ بِالْفَقْرِ, and do not despair because of poverty. Okay, you might be poor today, but tomorrow, who knows, you might be very rich or very wealthy. Or you might be very wealthy today, and tomorrow you might be very poor. So never really judge the situation on how you are today, and don't always assume that your situation is always in peril or always in a disaster. You never know what Allah has in store for you. Ya ibn Adam, la tafrah bil ghina, O son of Adam, do not be ecstatic over the wealth that you possess. وَلَا تَقْنَطْ بِالْفَقْرِ, or do not despair of hope because of poverty. وَلَا تَحْزَنْ بِالْبَلَاءِ, and do not grieve because of tribulation. وَلَا تَفْرَحْ بِالرَّخَاءِ, and do not be overpleased and ecstatic with the easy times. Why? Because in times of ease, that doesn't last forever. It's not always a situation where you're going to be in ease. Sometimes the difficulty comes. Though then he says, فَإِنَّ الذَّهَبَ, or he mentioned, Ali ibn Abi Talib in this quote, فَإِنَّ الذَّهَبَ يُجَرَّبُ بِالنَّارِ, because gold is tested by the fire. Meaning, in order for a person to get pure gold is a mineral, it has to be extracted through the process of furnacing the gold. So you put it in the furnace and you burn it in order for you to be able then to therefore after that extract the pure gold that the person wants. So in order for you to retain or to retrieve the actual gold that you want, you put it through fire. Similarly, that's what happens with the human being. Though he says, وَإِنَّ الْعَبْدَ الصَّالِحَ يُجَرَّبُ بِالْبَلَاءِ. As for the person who is a righteous servant, they are set straight and they are trialed by tribulation. They are inflicted with tribulation. And he says, وَإِنَّكَ لَا تَنَالُ مَا تُرِيدُ إِلَّا بِتَرْكِ مَا تَشْتَهِي. And you will never really be able to reach what you want to reach except by abandoning that which you love the most or that which you desire. So sometimes there might be certain desires that we have and certain things that we really like doing, that we enjoy doing, or that we enjoy generally speaking, that's holding us back from reaching where we want to reach or where we can reach. It's kind of diminishing the potential that we have to reach where we want to reach. The author says, وَلَن تَبْلُغَ. And then he says, before I go to the next section, وَإِنَّكَ لَا تَنَالُ مَا تُرِيدُ إِلَّا بِتَرْكِ مَا تَشْتَهِي. It's very important. وَإِنَّكَ لَا تَنَالُ مَا تُرِيدُ. You will never really be able to reach where you want to reach except by leaving that which you desire the most. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the Quran, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. Which means you will never really truly reach piety except and until you are ready to spend with that which you love the most. Are you willing to part ways with that which you truly love? Because if you're not, that means you're never going to really reach absolute piety. That's an Quranic explanation of this section. The author says, وَلَن تَبْلُغَ مَا تُؤَمِّلُ إِلَّا بِالصَّبْرِ عَلَى مَا تَكْرَهُ. And he says you will never really be able to reach the pinnacle that you want to reach except by being patient with that which you dislike. You need to be patient with that which you do not like. The author says, وَابْذُلْ جُهْدَكَ لِرِعَايَةِ مَفْطُرِضَ عَلَيْكَ. And expend your efforts meaning do as much as you can and expend your efforts in maintaining that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made obligatory upon you, or by fulfilling the obligation that Allah has placed upon you. So then he says, وَرَضَ بِمَا أَرَادَكَ اللَّهُ لَهُ. Be pleased with that which Allah has ordained for you and that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. قال ابن مسعود رضي الله عنه. Then he quotes Ibn Mas'ud رضي الله عنه. إرضى, where the author he says, إرضى بما قسم تكن من. Allah has allotted you in your life, you will be from the richest of people. Okay, واجتنب ما حرم الله عليك تكن من أورع الناس. And abstain yourself and stay away from that which Allah has made impermissible for you, and you will be from the most devout of people. Okay, so a very, very interesting way of putting it. So you want to be a devout person close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, stay away from that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made impermissible. And there's so much to say, but the thing is, I'm really trying to go through as much of the text as possible, so I don't want to give too much of a commentary. But every single statement that the author makes can really be explained in so many, it can be commented on in such an extensive way, because it's really, really profound, some of these statements. Especially the fact that he really quotes a lot of the companions as well, and some of the early Muslims. So it's really one of the most important texts that a person can study, especially in regarding purification and coming closer to Allah. We'll end on this note, inshallah, for this evening, and we'll conclude it here, inshallah, until next week. Jazakumullah khair for joining me, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to join each other once again. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us good health. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us and our families. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve all of us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us paradise. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to meet the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Jazakumullahu khairan. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين الحمد لله رب العالمين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته